All right, guys, welcome to October 11th pre-recorded Zoom. Let's go ahead and see. Pretty much what we were covering, I believe last week, was the recovery, short-term recovery of EU and AU, and then seeing how we could potentially see a continuation within the next week or two. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now, in terms of, you know, a type of recovery. And we'll go ahead and start with DXY, right? Yeah, pretty much. I don't recall if I did this on Zoom. I remember putting this line. I just don't remember if it was on Zoom. And this was kind of the area that I was looking into, seeing if by the morning we could see a transition. But I do recall putting, I actually don't recall if I put this on Zoom or not, but yeah, as of now, we have solidified lows and highs. And right, because of that, I'm going to zoom out and seeing what our ranges are. So because that is a solidified high internally, right, that could be a sign of internal potential unwillingness based on the previous high, retracement, potential unwillingness here. And I would only fully confirm that, obviously, if we are to take this out. But the more structural levels that we take out, right, the more significant this move could be. And so based on that judgment, right, we could see that there is a reaction there for judging EURUSD. We know that we are still technically bearish in the long term, right? The only two real sections or areas that are really pointing are really starting to stick out, in my opinion, right, our previous structure point and a potential POI. What happens after that is completely, you know, up to price itself. But we have taken out, right, preliminary structures and we are still swing bearish. So because the internal has converted to a bullish sense, right, and just by looking at this, you can see that there is a liquidity grab based on preliminary structure, and then you can see the immediate continuation with the invalidation right here, and you can see that that is what is propelling us to begin, right, that short-term recovery potentially. However, like I said, we are still swing bearish on this, and I don't see why this is to really give us, you know, anything more than just a simple retracement. Now, if we are to break my invalidation here, then I will, you know, now I can start to assume that this is potentially a low, and that we will potentially not, you know, give that deeper move down, because there is a reaction here. So this is technically a POI, right? But I am looking at potentially that, where you can see the continuation of structure. I don't really see, like I said, any reason why we should assume a bullish sense, only unless we are to break the red line here, and that is a minor intraday invalidation, and that is actually the last solidified point outside of here. So yeah, as of now, the preliminary range has been solidified. We are seeing a recovery of price, but the bias remains the same. AUDUSD, right, this one we were anticipating a bit longer of a push up, but this one is conflicting, because if we are to reach, right, our POI present here, if we are to reach that, then realistically we're looking at a liquidity grab based on the previous low, because I believe we were taken out, we were around here on Friday, and we had not taken out our previous or our immediate target. So because the immediate target has not been taken before the POI, it's now a bit more, it's not as appealing as it would have been if we were to give that recovery before the target was met. Just because you guys know that we're really looking for our targets and looking for our excuse to risk towards those targets. Once the targets have been met, then it's a bit harder to judge a bias from the short term, the medium term. But yeah, this one I'm honestly going to stay away from. I really want to see what happens, because it looks like momentum is starting to build up, momentum after a very corrective move, and this is something that I have seen AUDUSD do before, where it likes to do a lot of corrective moves, then it has a reaction, and then you can see that it gives the immediate push down. But as of now, the bias is still technically bearish, but I do really want to see what happens up until Friday, and seeing if this isn't potentially just a future grab, especially due to how overextended we are. So we could see some short-term recovery, but then if we are to reach our POI, then we would obviously need a bearish transition here, and that could mean that we could see another big move to the downside. And by that I mean pretty much another similar move to the downside. So this one I'm not really going to be too attentive with this week unless we are to reach our POI. And after the POI, we're going to see how that reacts, and that should really dictate which direction we go. Gold. This one kind of played out how we had assumed on Friday, where we were pretty much seeing potentially this begin to come back down, and then whatever happens after that move down would dictate whether or not we would continue higher or lower. But if we are to zoom out a bit, we know that technically the swing is still bearish, and we have come very close to our bullish invalidation. That bullish invalidation, even though it was not met, we do see very deep retracement. As you can see, the inefficiency has been met. However, as of now, I really am more towards that bearish sense just because of how deep that retracement was. So just looking at previous potential POIs, and I am potentially seeing this come down lower. This would have changed if to more of a bullish sense if we were to see some sort of transition, right, at a previous structure point, 50% inefficiency, but this is now pretty deep of a retracement. So now, especially how this continues over the next 2 to 3 days, could dictate that we see, you know, this continue to come lower, just because the swing is still technically bearish. So yeah, this one, I want to say we were bullish last week, but as of right now, I can only assume that bearish movement. Let me see. This one hasn't really moved much since we discussed on Friday. We do know that a previous liquidity point has been met. Yep, previous liquidity point has been met, and we are anticipating, you know, at least a little pop off to give us, you know, retracement back into potential POI. However, we really only met structure here. So if we are to come back into the POI, I would consider it not as valid unless we see that bearish transition, just because the reaction has already been confirmed. So who knows, this could really just be the beginning of a potential pullback with liquidity being taken and preliminary structure being met, and then now we're seeing a premium, a discount, I'm sorry, where you see a solidified low here. So depending on whether or not this continues lower from the minor intraday, or if we see lower momentum right back into the downside, then we could see a little pop here. So just what reaction we get here in this relative area, or this relative POI here, is really going to show us whether or not we are going to continue higher or lower, because as you can see, there is potentially a turbulence point that is being met as right now. So structure point, potential turbulence point, whatever happens there, that reaction will give us a sense of whether or not this is going to give a bigger move to the upside, or if we're just going to transition back and continue, right, the immediate continuation towards the downside. So yeah, with that being said, I will see you guys on Friday.